doing it. You supposed to be happy you sitting there with Kid L. Why you mad?
The Kid L Podcast.
Rocking and rolling. We have Rob in the building. How you doing today?
Yes, sir. I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
You've worked with, one of the idols of who's creating the films in Detroit and films in Michigan. You worked with Mula Films.
Yes.
That's huge because I know you were doing some mentorship for them, right?
Yeah. I mean, actually, I didn't just work with them. Like, I watched them grow up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, T used to come into my barbershop back in the day, Unique Barbershop. And obviously, I had no idea what he would create and become. But when I met T, he was trying to be a producer.
Really?
Yeah, he was heavy into the music game. And so I don't know if do you know the story?
The Mula film story?
Yeah.
No, tell me.
See, I don't think nobody knows this story.
Okay.
T actually was kind of the centerpiece for building several of the local artists over in Southwest, Murder Pain, Fast Life Tales, a couple others. And the way he told the story to me is that he reached out to a couple people to create music videos for his artists, and they would either take too long, they didn't see the vision, just he would always have challenges. And so I guess one day it turned into a huge fight in the studio, and whoever the producer was at the time was basically like, if you think you can do it better, then do it yourself. And he was like, all right, bet. And so that was the start of him getting behind the camera and coming out of the studio.
Whoa.
So,
man.
yeah.
Well, so he listened to those words and he said, all right, I got my own direction coming.
And if you know T, like, that's who he is. If you challenge T to doing anything, like, he's going to do it, and then he's going to do it better than everybody else.
Right
like,
on.
that's his personality. You can't, and it's cursed, though.
We still good, Nick? Like, is the camera still rolling? Yep. Okay, all right. So back on that note, so you watched him kind of leave that situation he was in and start his own.
Basically.
Were you hands-on with him? Like, were you just taking phone calls, giving him advice, like how to go down?
So T was a customer. So, you don't know. I was a barber for a while, from 2004 until about 2014-ish. And T was a customer of mine. So he would come into the barbershop basically to get his haircut. And during that time, obviously, we built a relationship. So this was him as the producer. And then he started to evolve into the film. I was evolving into a clothing line. And then beyond the clothing line, I was doing the social media and the marketing and the branding. And so as I was building and growing, he was moving into a larger space in the video world. At one point, he created the dopest videos in Detroit, and then the dope videos became like little short films for the videos, which then became, let's try our hand at movies. That was kind of the evolution. But through that process, it was always, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And that was usually our time during his haircuts, where we would get into like those type of conversations.
Wow, man. Yeah. I mean, I have my barber spits game to me 24/7, man.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do wish I could call my barber and be like, yeah, what do you think about this?
Yeah, give you some therapy, some peace of mind.
Well, let's reset to you, man. Let's talk about you. Where are you from? Detroit?
I'm not. We were just talking about this. I'm not from the city of Detroit.
Okay.
I'm actually from Romulus.
Okay.
I'm like an adopted child of Detroit. I moved there. I moved my business there in 2004 to work underneath a barber who owned the shop. And then she decided that she wanted to do something different. I bought that shop 3 years later. So from 2007 until 2020, I own a barbershop in Southwest.
Cool.
Yeah, so I kind of have the best of both worlds, from the suburbs, but have had owned and operated a business out of the city since then. And then now my agency is downtown Detroit. 1420 Washington. So right in the heart of the city.
So you went from, you're a barber working kind of under somebody, I'm guessing, kind of?
Yeah, I rented a chair for a lady named Jennifer Mundo at Unique Barbershop.
I do always wonder about that when renting a chair. Like, what's like the average cost to rent a chair when you're working for somebody else's barbershop?
It fluctuates. 2004, the going rate was anywhere between $75 and like $125
Per day?
per week.
Oh, per week.
Per week, yep. And then now it ranges anywhere from 200. I know from some places that charge like 500 a week. And it really depends on what type of brand the barbershop has, like what the owner is going to do for the barber beyond give them the chair. Some do outside marketing and stuff like that. So
what's like the most annoying thing customers do when they get in the chair? That you wish you could just tell everybody, like, yo, this is something that still happens to this day. You guys got to stop doing
There's
this.
so many annoying things. My number one pet peeve when I was a barber was when the client would stare at you like while you're cutting their hair. It's like the weirdest, most just like it completely takes your concentration away. So like if you're getting a haircut, don't sit there and stare at your barber. Like close your eyes. Like it's just weird.
I would do that. Like when my barber would be right face to face with me, I look up in the corner, but then I'm like, man, now he's moving to this corner. Now it's weird. Now it's not cool that I'm looking at that corner. So now just close your eyes, right?
Closing your eyes, I think, the easiest way to avoid the awkwardness.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like and believe it or not, like it don't happen. Like it didn't happen that much. In 10 years, there's probably 10 people that did it. And so it's like, if you do that, it just says something about your personality. It's just like something is off. Yeah. So,
talk about now you're building your own businesses. You're becoming an entrepreneur at that age. What's like your first business ventures from that point where you got your own barbershop now, and now you're going off into brands and starting your own brand itself? Yeah.
So, my first business was actually a magazine, which you find interesting because the magazine was a music and fashion-based magazine that I was trying to do for the city of Romulus. So it was called Advantage Entertainment. I actually worked with another kid, Kid the Producer. Have you heard of that name?
I actually have heard of Kid the Producer.
So Kid the Producer, back in the day, produced for my brother and a lot of other rappers, including BG, Juvenile, Cash Money. Cool. Like he had, a wide variety of clients, and he actually got he had a platinum producing plaque for BG's Living Legend album. Mm-hmm. So he was like, back then he's still pretty known from like just a Detroit history standpoint. But at that time when I was doing that magazine, he was like, if you talked about producers in Detroit, he was probably the top producer in Detroit. Cool. And so that was kind of my start in entrepreneurship. At that time, I wasn't a full-time entrepreneur, though. I was working a job I thought I would retire from, making really good money. And so I was supporting my brother's career as well as Kid's career as they were evolving. I was a young guy too, like really young, but wet behind my ears. Like I didn't really know what I was doing. I was following their lead. So I had like their mentorship from like a music standpoint. So I was learning a lot about the music industry, especially the Detroit music scene, with no real intention on using it. It just was like, this is an entrepreneurial experience that I could benefit from in the future, but I don't know exactly what that looks like.
Right, so you were able to have like a third perspective of like what's actually going on without having to be tied into it.
100%, which now is probably like the best. If more young aspiring artists went into it with that mindset, like I don't necessarily need to know what my place is at this moment. I'm just going to observe, watch, and then organically arrive into the spot that I want to be in based on what I see. Because you might feel like you're a rapper, but you're not really a rapper. You're more of a producer. Or you might feel like you're a producer when actually like you should be rapping, So if you don't have a set idea already, pre-established in your mind, I feel like it just gives you a much better opportunity to evaluate the best place for you and then move from that point.
Yeah, the difficulty I think is that when you talk about people growing up in Detroit, if they do grow up in any type of poverty or any type of circumstance where they're growing up in a tough neighborhood or whatever, that they're affected by so many different like circumstances, and they're growing up in such certain ways that's psychologically affecting them, which makes it more difficult for them to make super conscious decisions, right?
For sure.
Because a lot of guests that come on will talk about how like they grew up like in a drug infested home, or their parents weren't there, or like violence was everywhere, so they don't really have time to sit down and zoom out and have that perspective of like, okay, where am I actually at and what's actually going on? It's more like, oh shit, am I gonna live or die today, or like am I going to jail? Like so it that's where meditation and yoga come in hand, right? Like if you're able to like use some type of tool to create distance within yourself, then you can actually see what the fuck's going on.
Right.
But it's hard when you're so sucked into it and you don't know what the fuck you're doing, basically.
Right.
So you're able to see these things, though. You're able to look at it from an outside perspective and see what can happen.
Well, no, I wasn't necessarily doing it then. Like this is my 2020 hindsight looking back on why that ended up being a really cool way to be introduced into the music. But I 100% agree with what you're saying. And I also think that because you have that perspective, you're actually providing a different way for young artists to look at it now, since they're having these conversations with you. Right. And I think that's super important.
No, I appreciate that, man.
Yep.
So when did you start actually utilizing what you knew about the scene and start breaking into it?
So I started with that magazine, and I used my connections with Kid and things like that to kind of start establishing myself within the Detroit scene. But I was also working at the barbershop. So a lot of what I learned very quickly about the barbershop is you don't know who you're talking to in the chair. Like everybody could potentially be somebody. And so my conversation about, say, Kid or music would then give me instant credibility with the individuals that I was talking to, one of which was Kid or T from Mula Films. So as soon as Mula realized that I was connected to Kid, that created an instant connection with me and him, which, started the conversations about, everything that we ended up talking about. So that was kind of the starting point for like my business mindset. Unique Barbershop, when I took that over in 2007, the idea was I was going to get this barbershop to a level that I wanted, and then I was going to create more barbershops like around the city. So it'd be like a Unique 1, a Unique 2, a Unique 3. And what I learned immediately after like 1 year is I don't want any more barbershops. It was like way too much of just an emotional strain, like keeping several personalities in check and trying to get them to basically move in a uniform manner was just like, it was pretty much impossible.
Right.
So I was like, yeah, this isn't, if I'm going to put that much energy into something, there's no way I want to put it into this, because I can only be in so many places at once, and it's just not scalable.
Right.
Like, it's just unrealistic that I could scale that.
You like stuff where it's your responsibility, because when it's in your control, you handle it the way it's supposed to be handled.
Right. Well, and then if anyone knows anything about barbershops, a barbershop success is based on the environment and the culture you create. And a lot of times you can't create that culture unless you're physically there. And so, you only can be so many places, right? So if you're not spending enough time at the location, it will begin to develop the personality or the culture of the person who's there the most consistently.
Yeah, my friend Rose actually told me that he's an engineer, like a producer, and he said that he's like 90% of what a producer and engineer really is doing is making sure that you set the conditions properly for the artist to give their best performance
100%.
on the microphone. Yeah. So I can understand what you're saying with coming into a barbershop and it feeling like a home type feeling, or like a place that you feel comfortable coming back to and want to just stay there. You know what I mean?
You do yoga, so you understand energy, and you understand what it takes to create a space that a person can be the best version of themselves in, right? And a lot of barbershops, especially like in the hood, like Southwest, or some of the places in the city, the barbershop is really a representation of what they leave at home, right? So it's very emotional. It's very unpredictable. There's yelling, there's, sports talk, there's fashion talk, music talk. It's like high energy, which is fine. That wasn't me. Like, that's not my natural personality. I come from a different place. If I'm going to somewhere that I want to work every day, I need it to feel like an environment that I want to be in. Not saying that it won't ever turn into that, but the environment that it was when I first went into it, it was like, if this is going to be my place, I have to, change this environment a little bit. It took like 5-6 years to get it where I wanted it to be, but eventually it happened. I'm not spending 5-6 years getting other places or changing cultures, for other barbershops. Like, it just didn't make sense. So,
right on.
So I pivoted from that idea to creating a lifestyle brand around Unique. And the idea was, let's take this word, which I feel is a great word. Let's turn it into an acronym. Unifying nationalities by encouraging education and knowledge. And then let's use it for whatever we want to do with it. So clothes, music, events, like whatever. Our goal is, we're going to bring people together. And that kind of was like the start of everything.
Did you guys find success immediately with it, or did it take a time?
It took a little. It's still in the works as we speak. But the success was in that the barbershop created credibility, and it opened doors for us. And because it opened doors, I was immediately able to establish relationships that the average person wouldn't have been able to establish if they were starting a brand from scratch. So, like, an example of that is when I realized Detroit's social influencers and impact happened in the clubs of Detroit. It was like, okay, I need to create relationships with club owners and promoters. This is before influencers became a thing. This is 2010, 11, 12, right? Kind of pre-social media wave. And promoters and owners to clubs was like my way to connect with large audiences. And so my first entry was connecting with DJ Godfather, who at the time was running Blue nightclub on Saturdays. And so I went to him. I said, I have a decent following. I'm launching this clothing line. I don't need any money. I'm going to bring you a ton of people, and I just need you to let me put my clothing on display. And he was like, bet, like, let's do it. And that was my entry into like Detroit's nightlife. And I've been a part of it ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you guys found success by being able to just market your brand inside of the clubs?
Well, market our brand inside of, not in clubs, putting our brand inside of places that harness people's attention at that moment, right? So, like, now the attention is on social media, so you don't necessarily need that. But before social media, you needed to find large audiences that you could put your brand in front of. And so at that time, the easiest way, in my opinion, to get our brand in front of a lot of people was to be connected to clubs.
Cool.
Yeah.
What were some of the highlights of that time that you could look back at and say those are like milestones for the brand?
Well, so building representation, or I should say connections with clubs here, was kind of like the credibility we needed to go do it in other places. So what we found out really quickly was that, like, clothing lines weren't very successful, and at that time there weren't very many. There was like 3 or 4 brands, and people in Detroit don't follow people in Detroit until people in Detroit go other places and become successful. And so we went to the West Coast. Like, we went to LA, we went to Vegas, we went to AZ, and we had a lot of success in those places. Denver loved our brand out there. And so we went, to other states. Social media was becoming a thing. And so my evolution was solely based on my evolution into social media was based on the fact that we didn't have a lot of money, right? We were operating on a shoestring, and we needed to get our brand out, and we knew the West Coast loved us, but we couldn't be in the West Coast and like in these different states. So we created Facebook pages with every state that we felt gave us some love. We created profiles around fashion related things. And then we built followings on all those states. It's like 5-6 states. And we would create events in those states, like 2012, 13, you could create events and put 10, 15,000 people on an event on Facebook.
Yeah.
And the math worked like clockwork. If you added 15,000 people on a Facebook event, you're going to get 200 people to come out.
Really?
Like it was like, and so we were hosting events around the country based off of Facebook events.
I believe that, man, because when I all the girlfriends I ever had, I used to they used to be like, I want to do something fun this weekend. Every Friday, I go on the Facebook events page, and I was like, fuck it, we're going to that shit.
Yep. That's how you found the hot events.
Yeah.
Yep. But
and if you put like a hot rapper behind it or somebody, like a little bit of a public figure behind it, it's more of an incentive to even go. Like I'm familiar
that
with
was
that
it.
person.
Then it was like Unique represented music, fashion, and bringing people together, right? So we would always have a music artist. We would always have the trendy thing happening to create the excitement, and then the goal was to always incorporate our brand into that experience.
Now,
basically.
as far as notoriety in Detroit for what you've been doing, event hosting, brand building, a business owner, an entrepreneur, do you feel like in the category, do you feel like Detroit knows that about you? Do they know you for that? So this is the interesting thing. In my opinion, if we were to pull out receipts, my brand is probably top 3 most successful brand to come out of Detroit, right? But our brand was never built on being attached to anybody individually. It was always built on this word unique that was just basically a symbol for all the people that contributed to our success. And we stood by that. That was kind of we took pride in the fact that if you ask who was behind Unique Collection, nobody could probably tell you. And then the social media, the social media, what's the word I'm looking for? The way social media is now compared to back then, you didn't necessarily need a face attached to the brand for the brand to explode or be successful. The way social is now, really it's hard to build a brand if there's no person attached to it. Right.
And so, with that kind of change and shift in how people consume information and content, my agency, I had to step out in front. It's you have to know that I'm the one behind it, and if I'm going to be able to grow and scale this particular brand. Wow. And so we kind of had to shift direction. So people know me now for what I do with social media and branding, especially in the corporate, Detroit's corporate world. There's no other. We are the largest social media management company in Michigan, and if someone out there knows a company that's bigger or doing it, bigger than us, then I would love to know who that is. But there's really no other social media management agencies. And as far as corporate companies working with individuals to build or create footprints in the Detroit Metro Detroit market, I'm typically one of probably 3 people that'll get that phone call.
Wow, man.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Let's start from the beginning of that, how that came together, the social media brand building company.
So it started with us building a unique brand. You have to remember, social media is still super new if you really think about it. Yeah. 2014 is really when people started using social media for business. Right. It's only 9 years ago. We were using social media for business in 2009, 2010. So I was just kind of ahead of the curve in understanding the power. I would sit in my barber chair and send messages on MySpace for people to come get their haircut. So I was doing lead gen on MySpace, and that's prior to people even looking at a message as a lead, or a comment as a lead. That's kind of new world thinking, if you really think about it. But that was my start. And then, as I became a little more clear on exactly how I was delivering success for myself, then I began to show other people and teach other people. And then, I would consult and do strategy sessions and things like that. Some very similar to what you're doing now in terms of helping people, because you've figured out some framework around stuff that you know work. And that's basically what I started doing at first. And then I realized quickly, like, it was taking a lot of time away from me building this fashion brand. And I was getting way more fulfillment for way less money. And anytime, like, you find fulfillment and you're willing to do things and you don't care about getting paid, that's what you need to be doing. Like, that's how, in my opinion, figuring out your passion is way more important than figuring out how you make money.
Right.
You know, for the long run. And so I talked to my partner at the time, still my partner, but at that time I talked to him and I'm like, listen, we got to divide and conquer. You take Unique and make it great. I'm going to put all my energy into building this agency because it's way more fulfilling. And also, it gives us the ability to literally work with everybody.
Right.
Like,
and
we can work with any company.
You've worked with major corporations, right?
Oh, yeah. It's like several. To name a few, so like Murray's Hair Pomade is probably the largest beauty manufacturer in the world. Dell Computers, National Geographic, Explorer. You know, there's several that we've done work with in the capacity of consulting them on how to leverage social in this market, right? Which is kind of like a different bucket.
So when they're contacting you, like let's say Dell hits you up to do work and they're basically saying we need strategies with social media, are they asking you for content that fits Michigan?
They don't understand Detroit.
Right.
The world doesn't understand Detroit. And we don't, this is based on the numbers and the facts. This isn't based on my perception. The numbers say that what works in New York, Cali, Vegas, Philadelphia don't work in Detroit. So a company will take a general market strategy, is what they call it, a general market strategy. And then they'll have a multicultural marketing strategy. Multicultural mean, you know, not white people, basically. They'll use the general market strategy and it'll be home runs in every other urban driven city. Right. And then they'll try to do the exact same strategy in Detroit and it'll completely flop.
Yeah, it won't work, right?
Yeah.
Detroit isn't a code that you can break, right? Detroit has its own algorithm.
It does.
It's its own beast.
Yeah.
And that's why it's the most beautiful thing in the world.
It is.
You can't trick your way into it. Like a lot of people try to think like money I can buy my way into Detroit. Mm-hmm. You can't buy your way into Detroit, man. Mm-hmm. You can't buy Detroit's love. You can't make Detroit start rocking with you. It's something that either happens or it doesn't happen.
100%.
And it's all a collective thing. It's such an interesting thing.
Very unique.
So with them, and I am noticing that too. Like I remember watching marketing from 2010 till now. Yeah. It's getting smarter. Like they're starting to understand. Like, okay, we don't get. It's not even just Detroit. We don't get this crowd. We don't get that crowd. So they're hiring these kids like out of college or like these kids who are like that live in that city or whatever that they're targeting. Yep. And they'll come up with these clever thumbnails and titles and memes. And there's people who make memes for a living.
Yeah,
and those memes actually generate revenue because it's targeted towards like, you know, the Chick-fil-A guy. Like the Chick-fil-A skits is a marketing strategy. Yep. How much of a Chick-fil-A guy will chase you down in your car just to make sure you're happy and give you your meal. That's marketing strategy done by a college kid. And that generates hundreds of thousands to millions of views, and now everybody wants to go to Chick-fil-A that day.
100%. Like you nailed it. You hit the nail on the head. It's really trusting the market and what the market believes versus trusting a board of directors or a marketing team to just come up with ideas. Yeah. And that's never been the case ever really in the history of you know, like corporate marketing.
But they're also probably realizing that their corporate, like the guys who used to do it and be fine doing it, are realizing like this new generation isn't having it.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, it starts to affect your pockets. You're gonna change things
like,
real quick.
Hold on, man. These old heads, this 80-year-old guy telling me how to talk to these kids is not working out. No.
Right. You gotta switch some stuff up.
Talk about some of the people that you manage yourself as well, though, man. I know you do. You have your own people that you work with and that you're helping generate growth for.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Honestly, at this particular moment, like I've kind of switched more into a more into a agency role, like where we're really only dealing with corporate companies and bigger businesses. We will every now and again take on personal clients, but obviously it's a little more expensive if we do it at this moment. But in the past, like just names like that people recognize, Nicole Hoops Alexander was probably one of my first real like individual brands that I like dumped a lot of energy into in terms of trying to help her really like reestablish herself, because she's had tons of past success and people knew who she was.
You're talking about the Real Hoops, right?
The Real Hoops, yeah.
And and so you're starting off. Were you with her when she was at the height of her success, or is it kind of like, okay, now we need to figure things out?
She wasn't doing anything really. She was honestly more or less hiding out. Like she was just kind of taking a break, and then she got to a point to where she was ready to kind of get active again and just really start. Like Hoops is a very she's very much into nature. Like she likes being in the woods. She doesn't want to be around people a lot, when it's not work related. Like she want to be in her serene, like forest environment. And so during that time, she was just really looking for someone with energy like myself, who was just trying to like put myself in a position to help others build their brand.
All right, so I'll throw you a question then.
Okay.
What's the number one thing you think I should be doing to blow up this podcast?
I think you're doing it.
Really?
I think the first, well, I have good positive feedback, and then I have constructive criticism.
Hell yeah, I like constructive.
Okay. So I think your consistency and your quality of people and production is like top tier, right? So yeah, shout out to the production team. And I feel like you've done a great job in choosing your guests. I'm going to assume you've chose most of your guests. And so I think that immediately, and if I'm going to keep it 100, like I know you've done a lot that I don't know about, but my knowledge of you is just over the last 6-7 months or so, and seeing the podcast interviews that you've done. And so, like that caught my attention. You could have been super active and super busy doing a lot of other things, but I think you have established a really good ear for what works and what doesn't, right? Yes. And the type of questions to ask. I think it's a very underrated skill set. Being an a podcast interviewer. And I don't think it's the same as like doing radio. Like I think it's more about a human connection that you have to kind of organically and instinctively feel, that allows the guests to share things that they wouldn't typically share, right? So I think that's the skill set that you have, that maybe you've thought about it, like maybe you haven't. And I feel like yoga and all the stuff that you do, like that probably has a lot to do with it. It's like a peace thing that allows someone to feel like they can open up a little bit. But my constructive criticism
Here we go.
is that I know you've established a format as an influencer now that will allow you to make money.
Yes.
And I do believe, in my experience of research and also dealing with influencers who have done the same thing, it is the quickest way to water down and really pull from the success that you've had. And, like that's easier said than done, because we all got to pay the bills. Like we all need to make money. But so many times I watch people who are on a crazy trajectory then begin to kind of either charge or not be as selective in like their guests and the things that they're doing for their brand.
Right.
And then the audience that you've established, who are becoming like your brand ambassadors, if you will, the people that's actually blowing you up, they're not as interested, because now it's more based on who is willing to either pay or collaborate versus you instinctively kind of filling this person out and picking. And this is just on the outside looking in, so I don't know what's happening behind the closed doors.
Yeah.
But
once I get to a position where sponsorship's available and like more prevalent, then I would do that. But otherwise, we wouldn't be able to succeed, because this isn't like our studio or anything. And like he has to get paid, and the marketing. You know how much money I put into marketing? You can call Detroit Rap News. Like we're not, sponsorships, once that comes aboard, that's when I'm going to be able to not have to worry about booking artists in that manner. That's not something I ever wanted to do, but it's a reality of circumstance. Like you have to pay bills, and there's no fucking way around it as of now. But I do agree with you. In the long term, like you got to figure that out.
Yeah.
Now there's another thing. At Imagine Theater, you were the first person to present Darren Brown's trailer for. Well, first of all, Imagine Theater is probably the second biggest, or tied to tie with AMC Theater in Michigan, right?
Yep.
As far as the two biggest theaters.
I know it was for a while. It could be different now, but yeah, as far as I know.
Imagine's way. I'm not gonna lie though. Imagine's way fucking sicker than AMC right now. AMC is kind of like that Dollar Tree version of like.
Yeah.
What the hell happened to
AMC?
AMC?
I don't have no other choice but to go to AMC.
When Imagine started getting those leather seats, I was like, what the hell is going on? The recliners? I'm like, I can never go back to AMC after this, son. But how did that come together, man? It's like it's such a big theater to book out.
So it's funny, like, to my knowledge, I was the first person to host any event inside a theater in Detroit or Metro Detroit. Now, again, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but 2012, as we were building the unique brand, remember I told you we kind of quickly understood, like, it's not going to be one pipeline that's going to take this brand to the next level. So we included music artists and models and, other people who had influence and talent. And so one of the people that we brought on board was this guy by the name of Lewis Hensley. I don't know if you ever heard that name or not, but Lewis was basically like performing at bars doing like karaoke, and he was really young, and he was just really looking for direction and a team who, had a little bit of traction in the area. And so this kid would legit show up wherever I was for probably 2-3 months and would ask me over and over and over again to manage them and help them and partner with them. And so eventually the persistence kind of, it sparked my interest, and I'm like, you know what, this actually might not be a bad idea. We're two black guys with a team of a few other black guys trying to do something very non-black at that time. And I was like, it wouldn't be bad to have this white guy just talking super candid and frank who could potentially open doors that we can't open, as a part of our team. And so, we decided to move forward with that, and it moved really fast. And Lewis' work ethic was incredible, and so we put him with some music producers, because he was a good singer. He wasn't great. He has an incredible personality, very charming. And so, I just seen opportunity there. And so long story short, ended up connecting with Mula, who at the time was TMB Films. Yep. He wasn't Mula yet. Right. So we got with T and we got with B. And we did a music video. His first single was called Out of Control. And the song was okay. Like, it wasn't great, but it was okay. And in my mind, it was like, no one's going to take this kid serious unless I do something just crazy and unexpected. And so I had a friend who had a friend who knew this lady named Ruth that worked at Imagine, and it was like, what would it cost to rent a movie theater and host a music video? Yeah, like, it's not even a movie. Like, this is a 3-minute video, and they sent us some numbers back. It was a little outrageous. Like, back then, I want to say it was like $3,000. God damn, son. Yeah, it was a lot. For 3 minutes? For 3 minutes.
Well, you're booking it for like the hour or 2 hours, right?
Right. So so not only are we booking it for that, so then we started negotiating because they never had anyone come to them and ask for a theater for a music video. And it's funny. They're probably gonna be pissed off at me for saying this, but we went and talked to the lady Ruth, who had no idea who we were, and the friend had told her that there was a music entertainer that wanted to use the theater. So we went, sat down, me and my business partner who was working with Lewis. I hired him to be Lewis's management. We were his label. This other guy was his management. His name was Thomas. And we went in and sat down with this lady. Lewis wasn't with us. And we started kind of telling her our vision. And she was like, what are you guys, some rappers? Like, are you bringing in a rap group to perform at the Imagine? It felt so like racial and prejudiced. It was so bad and just uncomfortable. And so like I immediately got like bad vibes from her, and I'm like, they're gonna shut this down. Like, they're not gonna let this happen. But we stayed professional, and then we explained to her like Lewis is a R&B pop singer.
Right.
Like, he is the farthest thing from a rapper. And if you've seen him, you wouldn't even associate him with rap back then. But the event was honestly like a huge success.
Really?
Like, it was, not only was it a success, it got us a sponsorship with a company called Oxy Water, which was kind of like a spinoff of Gatorade back then. And
I remember that.
You remember Oxy Water?
Yeah, I
okay,
do.
awesome. So Oxy Water had just landed a huge contract. They built a huge facility in Columbus, Ohio, and we met them at NBA All-Star game, and we were kind of like on the same path with the unique brand, their Oxy Water brand. And we told them the NBA All-Star game was probably about 2 months before this premiere. And we were telling them what our plan was, and we got these guys so excited. They were like, "You were not a movie?" Like, they were like just blown away by it. And so they wanted to do the same things for Oxy Water, and they wanted to do something similar in their city. And so we had Lewis perform live. We booked K-John. You remember K-John?
No.
Okay, so you gotta look K-John. K-John had one of the biggest records in Detroit in like 2011. It was called On the Ocean. They called K-John like the Ocean Man, but Darren did the video for K-John's single. This song was like on like top 10 on billboards for like 13, 14 weeks.
Whoa.
Like, it was that type of hit.
Oh shit.
Yeah, so you gotta look him up. But anyway, he did K-John's music video. They did a short film, and in that short film, it hadn't gotten that much exposure. And so I asked K-John to perform at this event. And K-John was like, cool, but can we play this trailer for this new movie that me and Darren Brown had just created? And so I didn't know Darren. Like, that was kind of how I met Darren. He came out to the film. Mula was trying to create a movie called Concrete back then with B. And have you ever heard of that movie, Concrete?
I know that Darren talked about that before.
Concrete? Okay. Yeah, so it was like this, like such a boiling pot for so many people who were doing so many things, but they weren't who they are now. But at that time, like that particular premiere, Mula Films, BZ, all the people in film came out because like this is their first time seeing their thing on the big screen. Right. And so it just, in my opinion, it created the reality that this is possible. Like, my movie or my creation can be on the big screen if I put the work in and do what I need to do. And so I feel like it was a huge moment in kind of like Detroit's growth, because now like everybody and their mom does movie premieres all over the place.
Yeah, you thought outside of the box with that. Like, you thought, okay, like, what's the way to take this to the next level? What's the way to take this content and these productions
just to get
the next
people's
level?
attention.
Yeah. When you put it in a theater, which is, the way of getting the highest viewership, like everybody goes to a theater to see the biggest production you can possibly see, right? Like these $100 million movies and stuff. Yeah. And so when you're saying we're premiering something at a movie theater, it's like, what the fuck are we about to see? This is about to be crazy. Like, what's happening over here?
The perception of it, when actually it's just the people that's there.
Yeah, for real.
It's the 400 or 500 people that came to that premiere is the only people that saw it. But immediately following that, it went to YouTube, and we like, that video, I want to say, did maybe 12 or 13,000 views immediately following the premiere. So it's like we dropped the link to the YouTube as soon as the premiere was over, and it drove. And that was like then that was like brilliant. Like, people thought it was just like the most brilliant thing ever, which now like it's who like everybody and their mom does that.
Yeah, but it's still cool that you that's kind of where it all started, right?
Yeah,
like,
that was like the beginning of it.
Yeah, like you gave this whole new concept for people, and everybody's doing it now. Yeah. And you seem successful, man. Like, you seem like you got everything working out for you. So it's like, and a way of success versus acknowledgement, right? That's always like the thing that people get a little bit of could be upset about it, or it could just be something that goes over their mind. Like, all right, I did a lot, but I didn't get notarized for a lot of it. Like, a lot of people don't know it was me that did that.
Yeah, it's like, in my opinion, it's like you could be doing it for the notoriety. And I think in today's social media space and influencer space, the notoriety is super important because that's how you get brand deals. Like, that's how you get opportunities to generate revenue for yourself. And so the mindset is quickly changing where it's like you can't play the background. Like, you have to really do things to make sure that people know that you had something to do with it, in order to get kind of like the quick or the immediate opportunity that could come from that. And back then it was completely different.
When you're dealing with the indie scene, I think that's more so, but I think when you're dealing with corporations, it's more like, just prove that you did that or you created that and we're good.
Well, yeah, I mean, right.
But like getting recognized in Detroit, Detroit wants like, yo, man, who the fuck ran that? Who did that event? Who did Backwoods and Bonfires? Like, who did all these things? And it's like, I don't even think that matters because even if you know who like Crowd Freak is.
Right? Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so Curtis Lamar, I don't know how many people actually know who Curtis Lamar is.
Yeah.
Like, I know, like, if you're dealing with the event coordinators and dealing with all that stuff, like, a lot of people might know who he is, but to a regular Detroit fan, they might not know who he is.
Well, see, that's because Curtis built a system that generates revenue for him, right? And that's the big difference. Like, that's my agency is a system that generates revenue, and like that's always been my thought. Like, ever since I was a little kid, my dream has been create money or generate revenue where you physically don't have to do anything, right? And so like Crowd Freak is a system where people use it to promote themselves or, you know, to generate their own success. So the creator of it, it's not necessary for you to know them. And most of the brands, when it comes to Detroit, you know, especially you're building like a fashion brand or, you know, you're a videographer or you're a musician or like a lot of the things that's connected to talent, they're not system based. Like the brand, the person who started the brand is important to the success of the brand. And if that person isn't connected to it, then people won't value it or they won't see it the same. Wow. So I think it's really just, you know, an understanding of what that looks like, depending on what your ultimate goals are.
That's beautifully fucking put, man. What I'm learning from a lot of everything you're saying is that you're a creative marketing strategist. You understand the market. You understand how to make things happen. You think outside of the box, right? And that's what's important. And constantly pivoting to make sure that there's always success ahead and being innovative at the end of the day. So you're creating things that we don't even know that you were the starter of, right?
And I don't care that you don't. Like, it doesn't really, like these podcasts, I think that's where they become super important.
Right.
Because in a form like this, I can get into the weeds and tell the story. And like now, like if you've known me for social media marketing, or if you know me for, you know, creating a fashion brand that now does work with Fashion Nova, or if you know me from like my wife passing away and like me doing a TED Talk, if you know me from those things, then you're going to find it even more interesting when you realize that like 10, 12 years ago, I started a lot of things that you probably enjoy right now.
Right.
You know, so I think the full circle of that, like I fell in love with Jay-Z, not because of his music. I fell in love with Jay-Z because like he was a drug dealer who made it out the game. And I didn't find that out until like 5 years after listening to him that all this stuff was actually true. You know, so I think like the story, the full circle story and finding out things about people that you didn't know is really what creates the emotional connection.
What was it like giving that TED Talk?
It's honestly, to date, probably the most incredible thing that I've done. Considering all of the surrounding factors, and how much like business people put a lot of value in the TED Talks, and that's like one of my primary avatars, is like super successful business individuals. And so for them, when they do their research and they find out that I was selected to do a TED Talk, I think it creates a different connection for those opportunities.
Man, yeah, no, that's huge, man. Yeah. all of my favorite speeches from big time entrepreneurs were all TED Talks, and you can't just get on those stages, man.
Yeah, no, it's not easy. It's a whole process. Yeah.
Thanks for being a part of this, man. Is there anything coming out or anything that people can look forward to from any releases or anything like that?
Yeah, one big thing that I wanted to bring up for you is I would love to have you a part of the next Creator Con. We launched Creator Con last year, and it was an idea that I came up with based on the fact that regardless of what industry you're in, I believe we all have to look at ourselves as creators now. You can be in real estate or mortgages. You can be a music producer or a videographer. As far as social media go, you are a digital creator if you're putting content on the platforms. And so CreatorCon is going to be a one-day event, and it'll include every industry that you can probably think of. And the goal is to expand it outside Detroit. With Detroit is kind of like the starting point. And last year we had everybody who's anybody from Detroit. This year will be more of like a voting system. So I'll give people an opportunity to kind of drop names in the hat to see who they think should be a part of the creator stage. But I'd love to have you a part of it.
Yes.
And I would love for anybody who hasn't heard of it to go check it out. Like it was pretty dope. And I think it'll be, in my opinion, the largest Midwest conference based around creators, in the country. And so,
no, for sure. That sounds
we're shooting for
sick,
it,
man.
Yeah.
I'm totally psyched for that. I'll definitely be a part of that. Me and Nick will pull up. We'll shoot some film in. We'll cover the event.
Yeah.
You're
going to be on stage talking about like what you've done with this podcast.
Oh shit, yeah, man, that'd be cool too.
Yeah.
I would love to do that. That'd be freaking awesome, man.
Yeah.
This has been, like I said earlier, before we got into that, man. This has been an awesome talk, learning from you.
For sure.
And I might maybe give you a phone call soon to just chop up some business, man.
Yeah,
'Cause
absolutely.
I feel like you know more than I do about a lot of stuff.
hey, I'm looking forward to it.
Appreciate you being a part of this, man. We're at Parallel Sound Studio, High Level Visuals, shooting these productions. We're out. Peace.